We got another post-game reaction stream for you today. This time we're breaking down Auburn versus Florida. The Gators come in and knock off the #1 Auburn Tigers. We're going to discuss the score, the stats, and the storylines. All that's coming up right now. Well, War Eagle, everybody, and welcome back to another edition of E2C Network Live, where we cover the Auburn experience and share the Auburn experience, I should say. Either way, we can say it. Where we cover everything in the Auburn experience, sports, culture, otherwise. If it's orange and blue, it's what we do. So we thank you so much and join us in what we're going to do in this particular live stream. We have a post-game reaction show for you where we are breaking down the first loss in SEC play for the #1 Auburn Tigers. The Florida Gators come in and get the W. As might have been suspected, it was going to come at some point, and you couldn't have found a better opponent to have that happen against. We're going to talk about it. I'm sure there are a lot of thoughts, a lot of feelings, a lot of emotions and reactions. We're going to do our best to cover all of that here for you. But let's start off with the three things that you need to know. The score. Score is that Florida won 90-81 in Neville Arena. The big stat that I have for you this evening, and it could have been a lot worse, is 61%. That is Auburn's free throw percentage. More on that in a little bit. You know, that's a big sticking point for me. And then your big storyline, which we've already mentioned starting off the show, the Tigers fall in their first SEC loss and at home, breaking a bunch of streaks in terms of how long they've won at home versus opponents, the top 25. All of that has been broken at this point. Maybe in some people's eyes, that could be a good thing going forward into the future. We'll talk about it, but there it is, the score, the stat, and the storyline for you. So much to talk about and get to this evening. We'd love to know who's here hanging out with us and celebrating. I don't know if you want to say celebrating, but maybe the relief of some of that coming off of the weight of the fandom, the team a little bit. You knew it was going to happen at some point in SEC play. There was a lot of discussions around that point, when it would happen and who would you rather happen against. But hey, I'm sure we'll break that down a little bit further. But when you come into the chat, we'd love to know who's here hanging out with us and talking. So make sure you check in with us. Tell us where you're watching from, or the War Eagle, all that kind of stuff. Even in a loss, it is never War Eagle anyways. It is War Eagle always. Some of y'all need to get that right. But what we'll do is we'll walk through some individual stats. We'll walk through team stats. Amongst that, we'll talk about the different storylines and certainly take some of your commentary, which will help flow us through some of that. Let me go ahead and start the show off as I typically have to do with these types of things and these types of moments of reaction shows. Thankfully, we haven't had to do that a whole lot this year. Only twice now have we had to have this type of discussion. And both times, Auburn has played its poorest game overall. However, you look at this game and you go, I mean, you probably could have had worse games than this, but it obviously doesn't work out the way we want it to. So there's some things that are left to be desired there. Let me start off with this. Let's get congratulations again to the Florida Gators, led by Todd Golden, our former assistant, a Bruce Pearl coaching tree guy. So I'm not happy about the loss, but if it had to happen to someone, it's someone that's come through our system and all that kind of stuff. So none of this claiming it as a win or something like that, but just acknowledging that if it's got to happen to somebody, at least it happened to him. And they gave us quite a fight in the SEC championship game last year too. So a little bit of a comeback or getting back at us, a different year and all that kind of stuff. But credit to them, credit to the Florida Gators. Came in here unafraid in the Nev, where you never win except for a few times. And they get the win over the #1 Auburn Tigers. Quite the resume they are building, having taken down #1 Auburn and #1 Tennessee now. That's pretty impressive, if we can't lie about that. On top of that, let me address this part of the show. I know a lot of you are going to be upset about refs and stuff like that. I get it. We're not going to sit here and just obsess about bad calls and stuff. Were there a few bad calls? Yeah, on both sides. But frankly, Auburn put itself in a position to be affected by those calls. And frankly, Florida came in shooting pretty dang well. And when you shoot that well on the road and some other things are in your favor, you're going to have a lot of success no matter where you are going to be playing your basketball game. So anyway, I haven't even said hello. I'm not going to be able to say hello to everybody, but just a few of you bringing you up on the chat, and lots of props going out to Florida, all that kind of stuff right there. There's a lot of this discussion. This is from Two-Timer on X. He says it was going to happen sooner rather than later. We ain't tripping. There you go. Obviously, I've seen a lot of people talking about it. I was predicting this to be our first loss, so I felt like it was coming at something. I just saw WT's comment. That's pretty good. You got to stop distracting me during shows, sir. That's pretty funny right there. Kenneth says, knew it would happen. Hate it has to be at home. I think that's the thing that stings the most is that it happens at home because it rarely ever happens at Neville Arena that we get beat at all, but beat pretty significantly. Like, okay, it's a 9-point win, but let's be honest, Auburn fans, we got our butts handed to us for most of the game. Even aside from that, Auburn had opportunities to make this a much closer game, either if it was still going to be a loss, and be a little bit more respectable. But to be honest with you, that 90-81 score doesn't really reflect how Florida was in control of the game pretty much after Auburn get built their 10-point lead. Let's not forget this, folks. Auburn had a 10-point lead at home in Neville Arena against the number 6 team, and they let it go. So that's why we need to give credit where credit is due and talk about it a little bit, honestly, and you're going to hear us do that. So if you can't handle that, if you can't handle us not obsessing about the rest, this may not be the show for you, but I don't think we're going to have too many problems with that. I think most of y'all recognized all of that out there. Okay, so keep some comments and questions, topics throughout the show. Let's walk through some things tonight that we typically do, and we're going to start off with some individual stats. I know, folks, I get it that you do not want to give out a player of the game in a loss, but we're going to try our best to. So I would love to hear from you in the chat. Please post POTG, player of the game, and their last name. Do it just as simple as that for me. If you don't add your commentary, it just makes it easier for me to kind of see what everybody else is saying without having to read everything. But real quick in the chat, let's see what everybody thinks right now. Who is your Auburn player of the game? If you want to give credit to a Florida player, you certainly can, but we're talking about who is Auburn's player of the game for you all. A couple of candidates you could have there. I think you obviously go directly to points and see what happens there to talk about player of the game. And I think this is one of those nights that you go, oh yeah, not only just the fact that he scored that much, but he was huge in moments, huge at the beginning of the game, huge at the end of the game, giving Auburn opportunities, shooting well from the 3-point arc and on the drive, as we've been talking about a lot. A lot of you are already saying it, and it's coming up throughout the chat. It is Miles Kelly. I think without a doubt tonight, you have to give the nod to Miles Kelly. 22 points, 8 for 18 on the day, 3 for 9 from the 3-point arc. He makes all his free throws, all 3 of them, 3 rebounds, 1 assist, only 1 personal foul in 35 minutes of play, which is by far the most. So Bruce obviously knew who his hot hand was and kept him in the game. So certainly he is worthy of being recognized for that. Some of you have already brought that up as Auburn's player of the game at 22 points. Credit to Janai Broome, who got off to a rough start tonight, but he does finish with a double-double, 18 points and 11 rebounds. Again, Janai's created such a difficult standard to meet even for himself that those just feel like normal games. But after the rough start he had, I do want to give him credit for getting it together and kind of giving us an opportunity. The guys that we needed to step up down the stretch, like Janai, started doing that, but we had created such a hole for ourselves that it's hard to overcome that, even if some other people start getting it together. I understand. See, WT said, I can't in good faith give a player of the game in a loss. You certainly can. You don't have to, but it's a good thing to give recognition where it is deserved, even in losses, in my opinion. John says, nothing to worry about. War Eagle, congratulations to Florida, but don't get used to it. I do love the mentality that we're seeing by far in our chat thus far. One of the things, and I'm just going to take this aside from the actual game, I do like our little community that we've built here. I think most of you are starting to realize the type of things that we encourage here and discourage. And certainly we always want to be constructively critical when the opportunity arises. And we all recognize that. We're going to talk about a few of those things here in a little bit. But I do like and appreciate when you guys come in here and talk about things constructively rather than destructively. It's just no good to anybody or anybody else when it's handled inappropriately. Shane, we're going to get to some of those things. Missed free throws and layups. Missed is a recipe for a loss. That's not a bad way to talk about it. Missed opportunities, just missed a lot. And that certainly is a factor in this loss tonight. Okay, let's keep going through some individual stats tonight. I know that doesn't necessarily want to be the focus, but Auburn has 4 guys in double digits tonight. We talked about Kelly. We talked about Janai. Your next leading scorer would be Tahad Pettiford, who came strong down the stretch, 14 points, 4 for 11, 2 for 6 from the three-point arc, 4 of 5 on the free throw line, 2 rebounds, 3 assists in 25 minutes of play. So he gets the job done off the bench tonight and does a really good job, as we've come to expect him to do. Let's give some credit to Chaney Johnson, boy. Chaney Johnson continues to get very little recognition, because he's playing effectively behind Janai Broome, but he will just step up for you and not be forgotten about, but because we're going to talk about him here and other people will too. But 13 points tonight, 6 for 9. You got to really be impressed with him putting up the points that he was able to. So that's your 4 guys in double digits scoring tonight: Janai, Miles Kelly, Tahad Pettiford, and Chaney Johnson, 2 starters and 2 guys off the bench. So a great job by them to lead the Tigers tonight. Your other scorers tonight: Denver Jones only gets 2. So after he had an outstanding game last go around, a little bit less of a game for him today. Chad Baker-Mazara also with a down game for 6. And Dylan Cardwell had his, 5 to 10, somewhere in there he typically gets. Chris Moore gets his 1 free throw early in the game. Love to see a SEMO basket. Jaheim Hudson, no baskets tonight. So that is your individual scoring, the breakdown of all of that. So certainly some opportunities, missed opportunities, as War Eagle Prods talked about a second ago. But opportunities were taken advantage of by certain players and others it wasn't. I just saw this. WT's goal in life is to, for those of you that listen on the audio version of this, he's one of our regular viewers here. I think he loves to distract me with funny comments and stuff like that. Austin, the running joke here, is my co-host of the Auburn Experience podcast. Austin, when he attends basketball games, we lose. I have no confirmation on if he was there or not. Typically, he does that in the Conquer Club Discord, and I don't know if he was there or not. Cody checking in with us, saying just to flat out, we didn't play well. Couldn't agree more. But certainly, we're not just focused solely on that. We'll talk about why we didn't play well, but certainly that is true. David's asking the question: is there such a thing as a 3-second rule anymore? They got a lot of offensive rebounds by hanging out in the paint. I didn't really focus on that too much, but certainly that could be something to look back at. Either way, I don't. Here's what I'm going to say about this game and the Florida team. And most of y'all have said this sentiment. Credit goes to them. Credit goes to Todd Golden for coming in here and putting on the performance that they did. And whether, they got a little bit favorable of a non-focus on the 3-second rule, or maybe more fouls or stuff, they still took advantage of every opportunity they get. And that's all you can do on the road, is continue to make sure that you put yourself in a position to win. And they did that. War Eagle Prod says those people who camped out at Neville on Wednesday were probably like, this was a terrible decision. Certainly that does feel like it. I think you getting the good seats that you would, even for a game like this, is still worth it no matter what. We are starting to get some Gator trolls in here. It only took a matter of time. Certainly you wouldn't be in here unless you had won the game. So keep in mind, it's always brave to be in here when you won the game. But if you ain't going to be here beforehand, don't come in here and be a troll after. Unless you want to have a productive discussion, we certainly can. We've been giving y'all a lot of credit. All right. Let's talk about any individual things that we haven't discussed tonight that we should. Certainly, we pointed out that Denver and Chad tonight have a little bit of off games. Certainly not something that you want to see. It was made up a lot by the outstanding game from Miles Kelly. Janai finally gets going. Tahad did. Individually, who leads in rebounds tonight? Dylan Cardwell. We need to give him some credit, right? He gets 5 points tonight. 2 for 3 from the field and 12 rebounds. So he was a beast down there trying to get opportunities. Janai was your second best rebounder tonight with 11 total rebounds. The Chad Baker-Mazara injury. So I'll be honest with you and pull the curtain back with you guys a little bit. When I'm here in studio, it's you'll notice too on X that there's not as much interaction during that time I'm getting set up. So I was admittedly a little distracted and didn't get to see all that much. So if anybody would like to fill in, I know some of y'all watch our show and listen to the post game comments from Coach. Maybe he's even addressed that at this point. I did hear that saw that he went into the locker room after getting into an issue there. So that's not a good look. It's not a good sign. Not what we need to have happen when we've already got Janai, who's been banged up, and Chad's been one of our best players, even so, just an off night for him. So thanks for bringing that up. But I unfortunately don't have a lot of detail for you guys on all of that. He took an elbow to the face from Cardwell. Thank you for the clarification there, WT. We've had that a lot lately. Our guys hurting each other. Chris Moore, I think, had that happen to him either last game or the game before that. Not saying that's really any significant to note. It's just an interesting trend to point out. But either way. All right, let's talk about the scoring breakdown for each half. If you look at it, Florida led at the half 48-38. So obviously they outscored Auburn by 10 in the first half. Auburn actually outscores Florida 42-43 by 1 in the second half, but it's just not enough. Florida was just a hot shooting team, resulting in that 90-81 final score there, and frankly, should have been a little bit different. Yeah, there he goes. We got our Florida fan who's in here. He says, "See y'all in Nashville." I mean, like I said, you wouldn't be in here if you hadn't won the game. So don't be that troll. Don't be that typical social media guy. But certainly, we will see you in Nashville and get another opportunity and crack at it. I think you probably lit a fire under a team that you don't want to have lit a fire under, to be honest with you. So a couple other things here. I know a lot of you were focusing on fouls throughout the game. Maybe some of you, not in the chat necessarily, but who are listening and watching after the fact, especially. Your total fouls for teams in the day were 19 for Florida. These are personal fouls and 16 for Auburn. So to be honest, they had more fouls called on them. We will talk about in a second, had more free throw opportunities. Tennessee. Florida took advantage of all the opportunities that were presented to them, whether they were right or wrong. Some of the things that people were talking about, whining about reffing and stuff like that. It certainly it needs to be said that even if those things were true, Florida did a good job of taking advantage of things that they had in front of them. We appreciate football comments in non-basketball shows, but we're keeping it basketball here. So we appreciate you doing the same, Prods. No offense, but that's what our show's about right now. Let's see. Unbeaten Lake says, this is our bad game of the season in 2022. We didn't have a bad game the entire year until March against Miami when it mattered most. My memory is decent, but I won't venture out with you and say there wasn't a bad game in the regular season, but I certainly remember that being a very favorable season for the most part. But look, as we talked about, Auburn's had 2 losses, and they were the 2 worst games for Auburn this year. In this one's at home. Auburn didn't shoot terribly. I remember correctly, the Duke game, we did not shoot well and still found ourselves in a position to win in Cameron Indoor. The difference here is just Florida played well, and that's just the facts. Shane, that's a good question. I don't know who the Gator was that broke their leg last year, and I don't know if he's able to play anymore, but certainly I'm not obviously relevant to this game, but it kind of jogged my memory when you said that occurred in that particular game. No matter what, I am liking this rivalry that is building between these two teams. Let's talk about team stats. To be honest with you guys, just doing a quick look, there is not as much bad here as I thought there would be. Obviously, I'm going to talk about the bad one, though. You know the drill here. We talk about 3 main things on here in team stats. That is free throws, that is turnovers, that is rebounds. And they will tell the story usually of the game. If you look at free throws tonight, 83% for Florida from the free throw line. That is going to get the job done no matter where you play. So hats off to them. I appreciate good free throw making. Us, by contrast, is 61%. That was the big stat I brought up at the very start of the broadcast. 14 of 23, 61% is actually better than it was for the majority of the game. It's still not good. At home, you must make your free throws. You must make your free throws, period. But at home, come on, you got to make your free throws. So if I'm going to, harp on anything for this team tonight, it is going to be that. And that is all. Most of y'all who have been here for a while know me, know my shtick here. Free throws, free throws, free throws. They are free for a reason. And think about it. There's a couple times Auburn's putting some runs together and weren't able to cap them off by, on an and one situation, making that extra free throw. You never know how that starts to chip away and do some things down the line. I don't know. It was very frustrating to watch the continue to rim out, spin out, whatever, and not just at free throw lines, but on the free throw lines the majority of the season. Let's see here. So that's that. Rebounding tonight, completely even, 40 and 40. They win defensive rebounds. We win offensive rebounds by not huge margins either way. So that's a push situation right there. Turnovers, we win. Only 8 for us, 12 for them. So Auburn wins 1. They tie 1. Florida wins 1. That really tells you what this game probably should have been, a little bit closer. What's the difference? I mean, we're going to walk through the rest of them. Florida, 48% from the field, 39% at the end of it, but we're shooting just on fire throughout the majority of the game from the three-point arc. They're 39%, so almost 40. It's crazy, man. Devin says that Florida won't shoot that well again, and that may be the case, and you may have just caught them on their best night. But I like what I did not like that it was against us, but as a basketball fan, I can appreciate the good shooting performance in this type of environment. And, so hopefully we won't see that again. Maybe, certainly. We got some questions coming in that are more towards the end about where we rank and stuff. We'll get those in just a little bit, but just hang tight with those and we'll cover those at the end when we're talking about the end. A couple more things to cover here on the team stats front. Let's see here. Where was I? Second chance points. We win tonight 22-15, which is surprising. Completely even on bench points tonight, 28 of 28. Points in the paint, Auburn wins 38-30. Fast break points, they win 14-3. So that might be your biggest differential there, other than their shooting ability at the three-point arc, which actually, when you look at the shooting percentages for Auburn and Florida, they're a lot closer than you think. Fast break points is really maybe the big stat where there's the big difference. So I said the big stat to start off with was Auburn's free throw percentage, and I still stand by that. But I think the biggest differential, maybe made the biggest difference now looking at it, is that 14-3 fast break point differential. Blocks, they win by 1. Steals, we win by 1. 22-16, they win in assists, but still not a bad assist game for Auburn. Do you hear what I'm saying, folks? Look how close this game was in stats. What was the difference? It's very clear. Florida shooting. Hats off to them. That's not making an excuse for them or for Auburn, saying this is and I know some of you have said they won't shoot this well again. I still don't agree that it's an anomaly. They just may not shoot that well at Neville Arena ever again. They were just ready to play this particular game. WT says a lot of their good shooting was a result of them breaking our defense. Several times we had someone out of position to guard a shooter. Thank you for giving me your explanation about what you mean by bad defense. I see that a lot on social media and stuff. People will be like, that's bad. They're shooting well because we're playing bad defense. Well, what do you mean by that? Do you actually know what they're doing? So thank you for explaining at least your opinion on what it was. You're probably right on a little bit of that tonight. Cooper points out every time we got a big stop, we either turned it over or took a bad shot. Yeah, you may look at those turnovers and say Auburn only has 8, but they came at really bad times, especially late in the game, and they maximized off of that. Let's look at second chance points again. Auburn wins 22-15. I forgot about it already. So this is a game that should have been a lot closer, especially within the confines of Neville Arena, which makes it very frustrating. I get that, and I'm very frustrated with all of that too. But anyway, so if there's something we haven't covered, individuals, team stats, the storylines within this game, please do bring it up. We'll cover it in the back end of our show here, but we do want to move forward and talk about some higher level stuff. What's next? All that things as we cover towards the end of our show. First, let me remind you of a couple things as we typically do here as part of our schedule on these types of shows. What we've got coming up next for you here at E2C Network is tomorrow night, 9 Eastern time, the Auburn Experience. That is our main podcast. It's the main thing of everything we do. I call it the flagship show. Sports, culture, and family. We'll certainly talk about this week in basketball and much, much more. There's been a lot to talk about this week, as there always is. Episode 113. Join us for the live recording, and you can join the Q&A after as well. If you enjoy post-game streams, even in losses, hopefully this one won't be, but you're going to see me whine and complain about Vanderbilt's arena 9,000 times in this stream. So just come for me lamenting about that alone. Post-game stream for Vanderbilt won't be a super late one, so join us for that on Tuesday evening. Auburn Family Nights, our live call-in show, 9 Eastern time, where we used to do them at 8. We're trying them at 9 for a little bit. That'll be live for you all Wednesday evening. And check out our links in the description, such as shopping with Alumni Hall. If you use our link through there and purchase something online, you support them and support us, and you support yourself by getting new Auburn gear that appears with them daily. Okay, moving ahead, if I can bring this off the screen for you guys, not that y'all want to stare at my ugly mug, but hey, here it is. It's not the worst thing you saw tonight. That was Auburn's free throw shooting. Oh, shots fired. Let's look ahead a little bit. Again, if you've got something from this game that we need to discuss further, please don't be shy. Bring it up. We'll talk about it, whether it's individual, team, storylines. We certainly can do that. Looking ahead, War Eagle Prods asked about rankings. Where do you think we'll be ranked? Frankly, I don't worry about such things. I know that was a long wait for you to hear me say that, but it's been nice to be number one for a while. Certainly, we won't be number one without a ginormous amount of help. And even in that case, Florida would probably jump everybody else that potentially lost. So Auburn will not be number one next time. I think if you are a person that is making the rankings, you look at Auburn's entire body of work still, and you look at Florida's anomaly of shooting. I called it anomaly after I said it wasn't. Unusually great shooting on the road at Neville Arena. And you go, it may not be a fluke, but it's certainly out of the norm. So this is probably one of those Auburn was due for, and it finally happened at home against a really good team. It's not a bad loss for Auburn in terms of the look of it. You lost to the number 6 team, one of the best in the SEC and the best basketball conference this year. So you're probably going to still be in the top 5, I would bet, which is perfectly fine with me. Don't really care about the rankings, care about where we finish at the end of the year. And hopefully that is in San Antonio, where, believe, if I'm correct, the national championship is being played, the Final Four. Next up, we talked about it. We'll have a post-game stream for that. That is going to be Auburn versus Vanderbilt. I hate that place more than anything in the world, probably more than Coleman Coliseum, that airplane hangar of an arena that they have. It is a monstrosity. It should never have existed, and I want to see it wiped off the face of the earth. Did I make myself very clear? Has nothing to do with the team or the program or anything like that. I just think it's the ugliest thing that's ever known to man. So you'll see me complain about that a lot next week in the post-game stream. Vanderbilt has been a very upstart team this year, knocking off people they shouldn't have. At least that's what people thought early on. War Eagle Prides, I appreciate you giving me. I feel like I'm getting all the questions. You're asking all the questions I don't typically go into. I don't predict games other than saying we'll win or lose. I think we will win at Vanderbilt, but I don't do score predictions. Just not something for basketball. It's just kind of hard to predict those. So I don't really see the point in doing it, but I do think that we will still win that game as much. And we better, as much as I hate that arena. It is horrible. It is horrible. But for the program, they have certainly turned a lot of heads this year. They're probably a team that nobody thought a lot of. So you got to take them seriously on their home arena. I'm trying not to get mad about it right now. Big week next week with Vanderbilt. Certainly we'll talk more about Alabama at the end of the post game of next time. Not really something we need to focus on now, but it is out there. A couple more comments coming in. Every SEC team has lost at home this year, and we were the last, so that's saying something. It is saying something. I'm glad that you have that perspective, Cooper. It is very impressive what Auburn has put together this season. I think one of the things that's very discouraging to see sometimes is when people have a sky is falling mentality about these type of situations and don't recognize the full story of what's happening here. This SEC conference is incredibly talented this year, and Florida is one of the best, as demonstrated by their performance today. So To be the last one that lost at home, if that stat's correct, Cooper, I'm going to take your word for it. That is impressive and certainly something to hang your hat on, not as a moral victory, but as something to look at the whole picture of what's happened thus far this season. Again, it was going to happen at some time. Robert says Auburn was due. They needed a loss to sober them up and bring them back to reality. This will hopefully help the team refocus. I agree with, and what Robert's bringing up here is a narrative that certainly has been out there a lot this week. And I think there's been a little bit of over focus on that. I don't necessarily agree with the narrative that you need a loss to sober you up. It can have that effect, and it certainly could work that way. I'm not saying that there's not something to that, but I do think that that's been a narrative that's been collectively a little bit over focused on this week. I was just like, why don't we focus on just beating everybody? That'd be great. But certainly what we're going to hope for, like what Robert is saying, that this happening on your home court, showing you that you are not invincible in Neville Arena, even with this a great basketball team you have this year. You got to be on your P's and Q's, cross your T's, dot your I's, even at home when you're playing against the SEC this year. That's it. Period. Said and done. Everybody is able to knock you off no matter where it is. Thankfully, tonight it is against one of the best in the SEC, and it has been a fun several weeks with Auburn being the number one team in the land. That is going to do it for this edition of Post-Game Reactions with us. Thank you all so much for joining us, especially those of you that were live and joined the chat. We appreciate your comments and questions as always. Again, your final score tonight is 90-81. The Tigers fall to the Florida Gators. Your big stat that we talked about was that 61% that Auburn shot from the free throw line, which definitely did not help their situation. And the big story, the first SEC loss of the season for the Tigers comes over halfway through that SEC schedule, which, to tie things up with a somewhat palatable bow, is an impressive feat to point out. Thank you guys so much for tuning in and being here and being part of our little family within the Auburn family. Until we talk to you again, War Eagle.